Welcome back to Northwest City Politics in the Know with Juanita. We're glad to see you again this week. We're always glad for people that are interested in what's happening in our cities, because it is important for good government that there be a dialogue amongst the city council and the mayors, including the staff at times, but most importantly, including you. So we're glad that you're interested, and we hope that you will take time to put down the email and phone numbers when it's your city or when it's a state office, so that you can be in contact with them if there's an issue that really resonates with you. Now, we usually will meet with people from one of the 9 cities in CCX's viewing area and talk about their particular issues with the mayors and city council people. And then from time to time, we'll talk with people that cover a wider area than just one cities, and that's what we're doing tonight. I'm very happy to welcome Senator Ann Rest tonight.
Thank you.
We like to go over what happened in the last legislative session and kind of just update things for you and highlight some things that you might want to be thinking about until we roll around to next January.
Absolutely.
So very happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I'm pleased to be here.
And you'll know from being here before that I'll let you introduce yourself out to our wider audience. Give them a little information about yourself.
Well, I am the state senator for District 45, and that includes all of Crystal, all of New Hope, all of Robbinsdale, the north half of Golden Valley, and the northeast corner of Plymouth. So all in all, 5 cities.
Right.
But I like to think that I can be called upon by the residents of all 5 cities, even those that I only represent a portion of, to deal with issues that are important to them.
Now, an area that's a problem all across the country is the opioid. I think I said it right.
Opioids.
Opioids,
right.
I keep trying different ways and
well,
listening.
We did pass an opioid bill. Finally, we worked on it for a couple of years, and it's going to hold pharmaceutical companies responsible. We know that there's been runaway dispensing of opioids from dentists to knee replacements to whatever, way beyond the necessity for opioid pain relief to get someone back on the road to health, and people, it's a very addictive. Opioids are very addictive. You can think of heroin, which is very addictive. People think of that, and what has happened in many instances is that people have gotten dependent on opioids, not just to deal with pain, but just to feel like they could get through the day. And when they're not able to get those prescriptions, then they go to illegal drugs like heroin, which actually turns out to be cheaper.
Oh my goodness.
And so we have a huge addiction problem, and as you might imagine from that, we have a huge overdose issue problem, and we lose a lot of friends and family members to overdoses from which they do not recover. And Minnesota, just like any number of other states, have begun to address that, and we are imposing a fee on the manufacturers of opiates to try and curb that huge supply. And Minnesota is certainly in the mix in that. We're probably not at the crisis level that some other states are, like in Appalachia and West Virginia, Southern Ohio, where you know, there are like millions of pills
I was surprised.
that are prescribed, and who knows where they're
right,
going.
right.
But they have a, but the level of crisis there is something that we're trying very, very hard to avoid here.
Right.
Although we have a significant problem
right.
as well. So I think we're going to continue to look at opioid addiction. I know that doctors and dentists are really aware of the dangers of opioid addiction, and you know, Tylenol and ibuprofen, a cocktail of those brings just about the same amount of pain relief, but they're not addictive.
Right.
Certainly, the smoking cigarettes, and now even the dangers of vaping and the e-cigarettes. We tend to treat the two products, even though they are touted by their manufacturers as something not completely different, but significantly different. We know that the vaping products still have nicotine in them, and nicotine is an addictive substance. They don't have the tars in them, but they have the nicotine, and so that remains an issue. On the other hand, a number of cities, we don't have a statewide law yet, but a number of cities have passed 21 laws.
Right.
I'm not sure how many there are right now, but they have made the sale of tobacco products against the law to anyone who is under 21. So alcohol and tobacco, same age. And we may say, well, why so many different ages of majority? Well, it's just the way it is. You know, you have to be 18 to vote, but you have to be 25 to rent a car.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
that's
I mean,
true.
it's like,
that's true.
So the notion that there should be just one age of majority, as we call it, that's just not the way our system works. And we used to have different ages for alcohol. And then we went to 21, and that's across the country now. And we've had a different age for tobacco. And now people are saying, you know, the healthy alternative is to move the tobacco age of majority to 21. And cities can do that through their own ordinances.
Oh, yeah, and they are, right?
Or maybe we could, I certainly would support a statewide ban on sale of tobaccos to those who are under 21. But we're not quite there yet. I think the more cities that adopt 21 and older sales age for tobacco will make it easier in the coming year or years to impose a statewide standard.
So is there some movement towards doing it, but not enough support to do it yet?
I think I think there is a lot of support for doing it, but the cities are ahead of us. You know, it doesn't take them so long to pass a law or an ordinance, and so they are they're moving forward faster than the state. But the state may end up catching up with them.
Now, we talked earlier about the business wage theft, so I don't think we need to go into the details of it later. But how does an employee, what do they need to do if that happens to them? Well, in regards to the new law that was passed.
There, I believe the bill the law
Right.
has in place a reporting mechanism
Okay.
where you can file a complaint if you have worked and your employer has not paid you.
Uh-huh.
And that, and I think by calling it a crime
Uh-huh.
and a felony, the employer now understands that they're going to be held accountable
Right.
in the criminal justice system
yeah.
if they don't pay. It's not just a fine.
Right,
It's a
right.
criminal justice issue
yeah,
if they don't pay employees for work that is verified.
Have you had much feedback on that?
Not particularly, but other than everybody seems to agree that it is the right policy, that wage theft is not to be tolerated,
Right.
and that we're going to hold employers to account. And I can tell you the business community supports it as well.
Okay, another issue is assisted living units, and
Yes.
this is a kind of a change, that there's been a growth of these types of facilities for people.
Well, Minnesota is one of the states that did not or does not regulate to the extent of having them get a license to have an assisted living facility, which then also carries with it expectations of the residents and their families that they can be held to. And we passed a law that is now putting into place a system that will involve the licensing of assisted living facilities. And we know that people go into assisted living who still have a measure of independence,
right.
but that may need household chores done for them in within like an apartment setting. That they need people who can be informing them or letting them know, well, say, did you take your medicine today, kind of thing, and that you look forward to someone else preparing their meals for them. And I think those are the steps in assisted living. But the services that are required and the standards that are required are all over the board.
So what
and
kinds
you
of
really
problems?
You really have to, if you're a family looking to help someone in assisted living, or a person yourself who's looking for assisted living, you really have to be a watchdog for those things. And so we passed a law that will now develop within the next 2 years all of the requirements and regulations for assisted living facilities, including the ones that exist already. You know, that they will have to meet, and to just to give some reassurance to families and people in need of assisted living or who want assisted living, that they will be able to have it with some reassurance of the level of services that are provided, that it's not going to be all over the board. There, at least maybe there'll be some luxurious ones, but there's going to be a standard of care, standard that all will have to meet. And I think that Minnesotans will benefit from that. And we're not the leader in that. There are lots of states that already license assisted living facilities. And another part of that is to make sure that those folks, as well as folks in nursing homes and their families, that we make sure that if there is fault to be found, that they do not have, they don't retaliate against the families for reporting some sort of abuse or misuse of one of their residents. So I think we're really moving forward in a good direction for that.
What would be some of the problems that people weren't able to resolve with their facilities?
Well,
one would be being abused by somebody in the
yes,
facility,
and I think it's you know, maybe not having their laundry done properly, or maybe charged differently. I don't know, you know, what particular complaints that may come up, but what we're looking for in doing that is to have, as I said, this regular standard of care and service, that when you go into or arrange for a relative to go into assisted living, that you can depend on the state to enforce
keep a certain standard,
a level of care.
Yeah. Now, are there other additional areas in this assisted living part that the legislature will work on, or will
that's why I think we're there. We passed the law, but we are allowing a 2-year period to develop all of these standards. So it doesn't. It's passed, but it really won't go into effect for the next couple of years, as all of these considerations are
put together,
are brought to bear, and are put together, so that we're not just expecting overnight changes. And we're doing it deliberately and thoughtfully, transparently, so that families, the facilities, the state, the inspectors, everybody's on the same page as we move forward with this licensing program.
Now, invasive species is a concern probably for any state, but particularly Minnesota. What are some of the issues related to invasive species that were discussed during the last legislative session?
We have had, we're always concerned because Minnesota is a big water state. You know, not all our lakes, Lake Superior, in our area, Lake Minnetonka, a Medicine Lake, that non-native invasive species are contained or prevented from coming into our bodies of water, that that foul the waters, that go after a level of in the food chain that interrupts it, so that fish that are native somehow don't have access to what they feed on, or that like the zebra mussels, they foul boats, engines, they foul all kinds of pipes that are in the that may come into the waterways. And in the Great Lakes, which I've been very much involved in, there are millions of dollars spent every year in the 5 Great Lakes, because we do have zebra mussels, to mitigate the impact of them fouling all kinds of activities, both commercial and recreational, on the Great Lakes. So we really are concentrating on the aquatic invasive species that are in our waters, and we made improvements to our own Clean Water Act with that, and we put a lot of money in it, over $600 million from the Clean Water from the what's called the Outdoor Heritage Act, but part of that is delegated to clean water, and we don't want. One of the things we try to do is education of boaters, so that when they come out of a lake, they really fisher people when they come out of the lake, they thoroughly clean their boats so that they don't have one little tiny thing that is on their boat, that then they go to another boat and another lake and they introduce it there. So the spread of invasive species is often done by human beings. And within our system, within the Great Lakes, the aquatic invasive species has been done with ships coming in from overseas in their ballast water, and we've been working really, really hard to over the years to make sure that ballast water discharges from we call them the salties, which is the ships that come from outside of the St. Lawrence River, the seaway, that we limit the damage that might occur from introducing new invasive species into our Great Lakes.
So basically it was on Clean Water Act that legislation occurred this session?
Well, the Clean Water Act has been in place for some time, but it is appropriating funds for the activities that are called for in the Clean Water Act, and that it's amazing because when they do all kinds of surveys on what is the most important environmental issue for Minnesotans, over and over and over again, they will say clean water. Clean water is what is important to them, and even beyond that, they want clean drinking water. They want to make sure that we don't have a Flint, Michigan. And the way in which our system is set up, that's really not possible. We can't have those kinds of mistakes, compounding mistakes. However, we do need to be very vigilant stewards of our water resources.
Now, issues that'll come up in the next legislative session, maybe we could talk a little bit about transportation and what affects our northwest area up here?
Well, the transportation bill continues, was a big disappointment this year. We didn't really consider seriously the proposal for a gas tax in the Senate. We did not. We have been using some of the dollars for automotive repairs and so forth for sales tax dollars for roads, but that's not really a good source of funding because it's so uneven and it can be taken away very quickly. What we have tried to focus on is the constitutionally dedicated funds. So the gas taxes, tab fees only go for transportation funding, not even light rail. I mean, not even transit, but it's been hard to convince some legislators that the gas tax, even though it has a diminishing return because people are driving more fuel efficient cars, and so they don't use as much gas. People are going to hybrids, they're going to electric cars, and If you have an electric car, you're using energy, but you're not using gas. So what is your responsibility if you have an electric car for the roads you're on?
Yeah, because you're driving.
And so there's a lot of really worthwhile discussions, but and the gas tax is not, certainly is not worth as much as it was 25 years ago. Right. But it still is a steady source of income, revenue for the state to take care of our transportation needs. But there are some legislators and legislative leaders who just say no. Yeah. And I think that's foolhardy. I've always, since I've been in the Senate, always supported and voted for gas tax increases because it is constitutionally dedicated. It can only go for that. And you don't want to drive on potholes. No, or unsafe roads.
Is the area of legalizing marijuana. Some states have, some states haven't. There's discussion. What's happening in the Minnesota legislature?
I have signed on to the bill in the Senate, authored by Senator Franzen, Edina, to start the discussion on whether Minnesota wants to go in the direction of legalizing, regulating, and taxing recreational marijuana or cannabis, which is what probably is a more technical term for it. I mean, when I was growing up, people called it pot. But whatever, everybody knows what we mean. And Minnesota has made great strides with being very careful about the introduction of medical marijuana into our healthcare system. It's still illegal federally, but it has brought, I think, a lot of relief to chronic pain sufferers and to any number of chronic conditions. And we have now seen across the country other states that have introduced and passed what is called recreational marijuana, where it's not taken for a medicinal reason, it's taken just because it is it's pleasure giving. And I think we need to be we need to be very careful about it. We don't want to just go willy-nilly into it. However, we also need to be concerned about the black market and whether legalizing and regulating and taxing marijuana is cannabis is sets a standard that does not increase or encourage the black market.
Well, I want to thank you so much
for
Juanita, sharing all your knowledge.
I've enjoyed this conversation so much. Thank you.
And we'll ask our audience out there to be sure to tune in next week for part 2 on the 2019 legislative session review. We're glad that you've been with us, and join us again next week. Bye.